Here, the illustration he's given us is this, that there are some that you just need to be discerning with your judgment. Give them the law. Tell them where they stand before a holy God. Walk away. Sometimes we just need to, let's say, knock the dust off our feet. But here in this section, this passage, the Lord is clearly telling us that believers can and should make a spirit-led judgments. So moral and biblical judgments, but not in the negative and critical sense, not in a mean-spirited way. It is not difficult for any of us to have a condemning spirit. It comes quite naturally. Why? Because it makes us feel better. Well, look at him. I don't do that. Look at her. At least I'm not like that. And that's why we do it, but it's not godly. It's a pharisaical spirit. I mean, you know the old saying, those in glass houses ought not throw rocks. Any of you had some neighbors that were like that ever? Living in their glass houses and throwing rocks your way? Well, we're all in glass houses if we think about it. In this body of flesh that we reside in. But so when we do need to reprove one another, and there is a time for this accountability within the body, do we do it in love? Do we do it to glorify God and for their sanctification out of love for them? Or are we just being destructive, tearing down, full of pride? In fact, pride is the root of this, by the way. Hypocritical judging is full of pride. It's got that big I in the middle. But pride, I, look at me, and look how bad you are, and therefore I'm somehow. It's pride. It's pride. None of us are immune to this, by the way. None of us. However close you are to God. Think about a man after God's own heart, the king of Israel, David. I mean, what better example of a godly man in many ways. But you do remember his great fall, his sin. And you remember the consequences of that sin, that his son died. Remember, David wept and fasted and grieved and hoping it wouldn't be so, and then the son died. And he marries Bathsheba. And Nathan comes to him one day with this parable of this man, and this man had a poor man. He was a poor man, had nothing, but he had this one sheep. And this sheep would dine with him and would eat at the table and was just a pet of the family. And this other man was very wealthy, had hordes and flocks of sheep. And a neighbor and a stranger comes in, and he needed something to barbecue there, to feed the man. And so instead of going from his vast herds, he goes and takes that one sheep. And David said, that man ought to be killed. Nathan said, you are the man. And David was humbled. David had not just took a sheep, but he had took another man's wife. And he had not slaughtered that sheep, but he had slaughtered the husband, who was one of his best warriors. You see, David was making a judgment on that man in the parable. Hypocritical. That man. What's he doing? Pointing. That man. No. You man. You man. That was from 2 Samuel 12. You see, none of us are infallible. None of us are an all-knowing judge. I don't have all the facts, but God is the judge. God sees everything. He sees the intent of your heart and the intent of the other person's heart. He not only is he our judge, but he has become our justification by sending his son, Jesus, to take my judging, the judging that I needed, the judgment due me. Christ came into it. While we were yet sinners, Christ died for us. You see, none will stand in their own righteousness. It is only those who are clothed, who are robed in the righteousness of Christ, who will be able to stand before God. You see, without Christ, you are utterly lost and damned. Hear me this. Hear me. It is to know what Christ did is not enough. It must be applied. It must be applied by the Spirit of Christ. You must respond in faith and repentance. You can know about it all you want. But there has to be a coming. There has to be an imputation. There has to be a laying down. There has to be an application to you what Christ has done.